Welcome to episode 83 of Live with a Maverick. My name is 𝗘𝗏𝗃, founder of Maverick Actuary. We are a content community. Our mission is to maximize the impact and value of quant professionals on a global scale. The goal of this series is to educate our community on the most relevant themes in actuarial science, risk management, and analytics. The theme of today's discussion is Actuaries in Esports, and we are very excited to have with us our guest, 𝗟𝗔. Andrew is a director at 𝗘𝗽𝗏 and the three-time Excel world champion. Not once, not twice, 3 times. So welcome, Andrew. I'm very excited for this episode.
Thanks, Dom. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so just love to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Andrew. I'm an actuary. I've been working for 14 years. Those 14 years I've been working in consulting. So I first joined PwC as a graduate in Sydney in Australia. Later on, I moved to London for a short while. So I was working for 𝗙𝗜𝗄𝗪𝗔 over there. And then when I decided to come back home, I joined 𝗘𝗽𝗏, which is my current company. During my career, I've worked maybe half of my career in more traditional areas in general insurance, or I think it's called property and casualty elsewhere. So yeah, things like reserving, pricing. A lot of my work was in workers' compensation and builders' warranty. And then later on, I did some more non-traditional things. So mainly just using analytics to help different kinds of clients. So for example, helping the government determine how to fund hospitals in a fair and efficient way, modeling how different individuals use different types of government support throughout different stages of their lifetime, demand for government services and things like that.
Yeah, I'm always impressed with, and I had conversations with the IAA president about that, how a lot of the Australian actuarial roles the new roles, I would say, tend to lean more towards data analytics, and it sounds like there's some interesting stuff that you're doing there. So also, it sounds like you have a little bit, you have the Australian accent, but you mix that in with a little bit of London, British accent as well through some of your travels.
Yeah, I still think it's mostly Australian, but I wouldn't mind having a little bit of British accent in there.
Yeah. So like you did actually provide a little bit of an overview of the 𝗘𝗽𝗏 role. So you said it's primarily consulting, just to recap.
Yeah, that's right. So 𝗘𝗽𝗏 is an actuarial and analytics consulting firm in Australia and New Zealand. So we do both the traditional stuff and non-traditional stuff. A lot of general insurance clients, government clients. So yeah, I'm currently working on a couple of big projects with 2 different government departments. I guess right now I am more focused on the analytics and helping them improve their decision making and policies and things like that. But yeah, I'll have other colleagues doing reserving and pricing and things like that as well. So yeah.
That's very exciting. No, honestly, I mean, I'm very excited for today's episode. I think it's one of the more novel topics for sure. And I mean, it's not that it's inconsequential. I just think it's, esports is a very exciting thing. And, so I did mention the name of the episode is Actuaries in Esports. So how do you think of, I mean, it seems obvious, but just from your perspective, what does esports entail?
Yeah, so I think if we start off with just sports, what is sport? Like, let's say football or tennis or anything. It's just kind of a physical activity or a game where usually there can be an element of competition. So and it can be watched by people. So it's like entertainment as well. And so esports is basically the same thing, just that it's not about a physical activity or a game, where you like use your hands and feet and stuff. I mean, you still have to use hands, but it's just that you use an electronic device. So you can use your computer or a console or something. And often people will compete in a video game. And Excel is kind of like a new esports where we are solving problems using Excel. Obviously using our computers. So that's how it becomes electronic and also like a competition or a sport. So yeah, I guess both sports and esports can be pretty broad. But yeah, that's what I think of when people say esports.
So I actually looked it up out of curiosity before because I wanted to see, because I know that Excel, I think it sounds like it became an esport fairly recently within maybe the past few years, but they're not showing us respect. They're not showing Excel the respect, because when I look for the categories, it's the usual suspect. They talk about first player shooting games, things like Counter-Strike, Halo, GoldenEye, things like that. And then you have, like you mentioned, the sports, things like FIFA, the literal sports like FIFA, NBA, all of those different things, racing. And then I think they also mention, it wasn't poker, but I mean, I'm guessing that poker and card games, technically, I mean, once it's virtual, I would think that that's esports. One that I'll actually mention, which I've recently gotten into, which I'll recommend to anyone, is racing. So within Los Angeles, I know they have it in many places. We have a place called World of Racing, where you actually go into a simulator. They have, race night, and it's like 10 of us all compete against each other. And, I don't know if you have a similar experience at Excel, even though it's different, but when they put us into the simulator, like, you actually sweat, like when you go through some of the conditions, because I'm really into F1, and that's what it's modeled off of, is like the whole F1 system. So when you go in there, you have to be really aggressive with the brakes. When you're going around the corners, you have to obviously have great reflexes. When you collide with other drivers, there's actually an impact. So they warn you about that. The flags are, I don't know how much you know about F1, but the yellow flag, all the different flags are very similar. So even though obviously it's not the same, you do actually get a good sense of what it may feel like. And I was just surprised at how much I was sweating when I was leaving. So I honestly think that if I didn't have to work, I'd probably be doing that 12 hours a day. So yeah, I recommend you try that. Anyone, if you haven't tried that, try the sim racing. So anyhow, so you didn't mention that, of course, Excel is the esport that you're the expert in, being the world champ. So how did you, we're obviously, we all use Excel in our work. If you're an actuary or anyone in analytics, you use Excel very regularly. So at what point did you realize that this could be an interest or a passion beyond just your everyday work?
Yeah, so it did start with me using Excel at work. So just building spreadsheets, solving the things I had to solve as a grad and things like that. The more I used it, the more I found it to be just a really flexible and useful tool beyond just what I was doing at work. So I mean, some kind of uses outside work. Some are obvious, like doing my own finances and budgeting and things like that. That's something that's very Excel-like.
Yeah.
But then also just using it to organize holidays. All you need is a table, right? So that you have a timetable. These are the dates, these are the hours, and this is what I'm going to do. And then other things like, for a while I was writing, kind of like keeping a diary. So a bit like a journal. And again, all you need is a table where you've got day and then you've got like what you want to write. So I found that I can actually do a lot of things in Excel, and I don't really need to use like Word and PowerPoint as much, unless you want to make things like pretty and so Excel can do so much, and so I just started using it in everything, and then yeah, I guess the competitions kind of came up later as something interesting that I found out about. So then I got into that, but yeah, just found it like a really flexible tool that it's probably more flexible than most people think. Especially, yeah, I guess there's a lot of different functions and stuff as well. But yeah.
So I saw that the competition is typically, I mean, I know last year it was in Vegas. Is it always in Vegas?
Last year was the first year it's been in Vegas, but I
Oh,
think
okay.
going forward, or at least this year's going to be in Vegas as well. And I mean, I don't know about future, but I do think they want to have an in-person finals somewhere. So yeah, it sounds
Okay.
like it is Vegas for now.
Okay. I did read a little bit on the history, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, there's a guy named Andrew, I think, who was instrumental in crafting the tournament. So did you just hear about him just randomly on YouTube, or did someone tell you about this whole thing, or?
Yeah, so there was actually a competition, an Excel competition that was before the one that Andrew established. So the old one used to be called Model Off Financial Modeling World Championships.
Mhm.
And that one I found out through my colleagues. So I think it might be a bit more well known within like actuarial or specialist financial kind of world people. But yeah, I found out about that I think in 2018, and then gave it a go, found it interesting. Like that was also a mix of both financial modeling as well as solving general like fun problems. But yeah, I found it interesting, so I kept doing it, and then got a bit successful in 2019. And so then that one got discontinued, but then another one started by Andrew just popped up. And so it was kind of like a pretty smooth transition into the new competition. And that was the Financial Modeling World Cup, which is still operational. Like it's kind of a separate stream to the Microsoft Excel World Championships. So yeah, I compete in both of those at the moment. But yeah, it's kind of grown quite a lot in the last few years, probably because of putting it on YouTube, making it like accessible to people to watch, and
yeah. No, when it comes to like when I think of competition, because I used to be a swimmer, and I was just thinking like you're good at this thing, but like with every sport, like I'll use the Australian analogy since you're Australian. Not every swimmer is a Ian Thorpe, right? Some people know they're gonna go for the Olympics, and some people just know they're just going to do it in college. But it sounds like from an early point, you had either you were really confident or you just were able to demonstrate that you are at that level. And it sounds like you just kind of transitioned from that first competition to this. So would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm Ian Thorpe level. I think, definitely the earlier competitions and even the first couple of, Excel World Championships. I think it's because it's still a growing competition. So, I wouldn't say that many people know about it yet. Maybe like this year, a lot more people know about it, but in the past, because it's maybe a smaller community, so I feel like there will be really good Excel battlers out there who just didn't know about the competition, or maybe it's people who just didn't want to compete because they're busy in their lives or something. So yeah, I certainly think there's a lot more people out there who the Inthorpe somewhere out there.
Don't be so modest, Andrew. No, but I think it got some good earned media because it's 3 years, and last year was the first time I think the first time I saw it was on LinkedIn. And I'll be honest, I thought I don't want to like make light of it, but I didn't think it was a real competition. I thought I wouldn't go as far as saying I thought it was a meme, but I was like, someone posted it and I said, wait, is this like a real thing? And it said ESPN, and I was like, wow, like I never thought. I mean, that's really interesting. So it seems like last year there was I saw the Guardian and a lot of course ESPN and a lot of the big media outlets posted on it. So I guess whatever they did last year did helped a lot, because that's how not just me, but I think a lot of people saw it in the media. So
yeah, I think last year having it in Vegas was the big difference. So
okay, that makes sense.
the year before was all online, and it was already on ESPN actually, but
Oh, it was, yeah.
and so we did get some publicity, but not nowhere near as much as last year. But last year, in person, you can see all of us are sitting on the computers, and there's a host and everything. Felt a bit more real, I think.
Yeah, so I'm glad. That's a great bridge to what I was gonna say next. So pretty much, I was actually tempted because I never saw the championships, of course, last year, and I've been meaning to look at it, and it just kind of, you kind of put something off, and things come up. So I was torn between whether I should watch any of it before or just come into this interview fresh and just learn like everyone the first time, but I couldn't resist. So so I went on YouTube. I never saw the whole thing, but I definitely did see some of the tournament. I saw the walkout. I saw one of the case rounds, and I saw the comment. I thought it was hilarious watching the commentators talking about name ranges. It was just really funny to me, at least, just to see some of the stuff you're doing every day. So let's you're the 3-time world champ, and let's dig into a little bit deeper on the tournament. So before, I know there's a qualification round for like there's criteria for like when you get to the finals, but when you take a step back, how do you qualify to actually be or participate in the tournament?
Yeah, so I think that's also evolved over the years. Some of the earlier competitions, it was quite simple. There's one big round of qualification, so everyone competes in that. And then the top 128 make it through to the I guess the main event. And then from that point onwards, it's a bit like the tennis Grand Slams where it's a knockout tournament, so 128 becomes 64 and so on. And then eventually, the winner in the finals. Later, actually, it was only last year where that changed, I think. So the kind of the end section is still the same, so it's still the 128, and then the last 16 or eight made into the Vegas finals, and then there's an extra last chance qualification to get into Vegas. So a few more people rejoined at that stage. But the other new thing is that during the year, there's a lot of like smaller battles. So you can also qualify through those rather than just qualifying directly in that massive qualification round. This year is kind of the same as that, but it's even more complicated in terms of how you get to Vegas. So I think something like the top 8 can go straight to the Vegas finals. Top 32 can go to Vegas, but have an extra kind of day of competing first or something like that. There's a flow chart somewhere on the internet. But yeah, basically the main qualification round is how, like, that's probably the easiest way to get into all this. But there's a lot of other ways you can qualify as well.
So you're going up against the best in the world, and I'm still going to give you credit. We don't know if there is any Ian Tharps out there, but so now you're going into the tournament. You're 5 months out, 6 months out. How are you preparing, or what special preparations are happening behind the scenes?
I don't do too much 5 months out. I think, I don't want it to become too burdensome. But when it gets closer to the tournament, that's when I'll do a bit more preparation. So I think just using Excel at work all the time is naturally some kind of preparation. Like I'll still, keep fresh with all the, how to use the formulas and so on. And that's actually just helped me so much over the years. Like you can get this far without doing real much preparation at all. But then in terms of more specific preparation for the main tournament at the end of the year, I also treat it a bit like actuarial exams. So doing a lot of past cases or like past papers. So just practicing cases, and because the way you solve those cases is a bit different to how you solve problems at work. Some of the functions you use might be a bit different. A lot of the cases involve like text, manipulating text, whereas at work, I sometimes have to, but often it's numbers rather than text. So yeah, it is a bit different, but nowadays there's quite a lot of past cases, so there's plenty of material to just test and keep learning and familiarize with how to solve these problems.
For a second, I was actually thinking, I don't know if have you seen the movie 21? It's on blackjack, or like, do you know the story of the MIT blackjack team?
No, I don't know that one.
Yeah, but it pretty much it's essentially card counting, and they kind of had this scheme for card counting, and so they knew what was in once they knew what was in the deck, they were able to figure out, how to manipulate the game. And what they would do is they would prepare by like when they would be on campus, they would simulate the room, so they would have waiters coming in and bumping into them. But I think with you, it's a little bit different because you're on stage. It's still pressure, but maybe then an environment is not as aggressive as that. So I don't know, but it just came to my mind because I know it's Vegas. So now let's talk a bit more about the competition. And I have to warn you, Andrew. I actually have some very specific, because I'm really just curious. There's one particular case I'm going to follow up on. But before I get into that, just if you could just briefly describe, how it's organized in terms of, you already, of course, described the 128 going down. And I think we have 2 heats of 8 at the end, and that's evolving. But in terms of, what you have to do in each round.
Yep, sure. So within each round, it's usually half an hour, and there will be some sort of case. So it's often based on like a board game, card game, or just any sort of fun problem. And basically you have to solve it. So there will be like different levels within that case, usually so that you can at least score some points early rather than like everything at the end. So usually the first few levels are pretty easy. Like you can probably do them in a couple of minutes. And then later on, it will get harder and harder. So the idea is that you you basically solve as much as you can. Sometimes you can build one model that solves a lot of different levels, and so that's beneficial because you don't have to keep rebuilding new models to solve new levels. But you can't always do that. So there is a bit of looking down and making sure you know what's being asked before you go too far. But yeah, basically solve a problem in Excel, and then the more you can solve, the more points you'll get. If you make mistakes, sometimes you might score like half the points, and then I guess it depends how many mistakes you make, but you can sometimes get away with that. But yeah.
Now, do the rounds get progressively more difficult?
They do. So both in terms of within a case, like all the levels get more and more difficult, but I also think the cases they give us in the finals is more difficult than round one. I guess it's kind of expected because you don't want everyone to solve the entire thing and score full marks in the final, and then you want a bit more differentiation between all the contestants. So by the time you've made it to the final, they probably expect you to be to be a bit faster. So yeah, those are typically a bit harder.
Okay, so what's funny is that, and maybe I'm overanalyzing the case. I'm going to try to give myself a little bit of credit, but when you said the first round was easy, so let's go back to 2023, the first case. So I'm going to give you my rudimentary interpretation of what I saw. So essentially, they presented you with this like a fantasy Excel sports case where you had these fictional Excel superstars competing against each other. What I saw was that they had all of these cases that required, they assessed like several different skills like functions analysis, tables, lambdas, VBA, design, and speed. And I think all the different cases had like different levels of proficiency, and your goal was to forecast a score of the matches between these fictional characters, and kind of calculate the points that they could score and what their form was on a particular day. So that's kind of my interpretation, even though, to be honest, I had to rewind it a few times just to make sure I was following. And when I was watching, I couldn't see some of the fine print in terms of, you probably could see more detail than me in terms of specifically, I think you had like seven levels and some bonus rounds, 5 bonus rounds. Now, one thing that stood out to me, and again, this is a strategic secret, you don't have to tell me, but I noticed that you went for the bonus points. At least it appeared that you went for the bonus point. Not just you, a few people went for the bonus points first. Is that like a common thing? Is there a thought process behind that?
Yeah, that's pretty common. So it's because there are usually limits to how many people can get the bonus points. So let's say if they say only the first 3 people can get this bonus question, then you want to go for it. Like if you can afford to, then you want to go for it first, because otherwise you come back to it later and it's already taken up by 3 people. So yeah, that's why a lot of people do go for the bonus points first. The risk is that you might spend time on the bonus points and then not have enough time to solve an entire level later, because a whole level is worth more than any one of those bonus points. So yeah, it's it can work out both ways, but I think it's not uncommon to see people go for bonus points first.
That's a classic, sounds like a classic risk reward trade-off, like just like an actuary. No, something else happened, and I hope I'm not bringing back any negative memories. So Andrew's on the stage, everyone, and he's working through the problems, and all of a sudden they say, "Oh, is he eliminated? Is the defending champ eliminated?" And his points stall on 75, and I see a bit of consternation. People are suspecting there's a glitch in the computer or something. And then I see someone interviewing you and you're like, I'm kind of confused. So talk us through what happened there, because ultimately it seemed, I never saw everything in between, but of course you were reinstated, but what happened there?
Yes, it is. That is something that the general audience wasn't able to see because they only see what's on the YouTube. So what happened from my perspective was I was just solving the case. At first, the scoreboard was off. And so usually the scoreboard is meant to be on so you can see like, am I scoring points? Am I getting it correct? And then if you're not, you want to fix your question, because otherwise you're going to be stuck on 0. So for a while it was off, so I just kept going because I can't just sit there and wait. But the first time it got turned on, I saw I was only on 75 when I had already progressed through like 3 levels, and I think I thought I did 3 bonus points, although turned out one of those was probably wrong. But yeah, I was way beyond what I should. like way beyond 75 if I got things correct. So obviously, in my perspective, I got a ton of things wrong. So I had to scramble and go back and check everything. So even question 1 was wrong if I'm only on 75, I think. So I started checking question 1 because that should be the easiest. It should be very obvious. I couldn't find anything wrong because it's actually a really simple calculation. So there wasn't too much that could go wrong. I tried, am I not rounding it to the right decimal places and so on. So yeah, I was starting to panic. And then eventually they came over and said I was eliminated. And so I thought, okay, it's not my day. Like, how did I get everything wrong? And then afterwards, like straight after they said I'm out, they also said, oh, hold on. We're investigating, just keep going for now. And so that's when I thought, okay, maybe it's not me. Maybe there's something else that's gone wrong. And then, so I kept going. But then eventually they said I was out again. So then I went out. And that's when I got to the bottom of the stage where like I could talk to other people who were watching. That's when I found out that, something probably did go wrong. Because they were saying like, oh, this is wrong. Like you were solving the questions, it was fine. And the score wasn't like updating. So yeah, that was when I realized that it wasn't, it was a scoreboard issue kind of thing. What actually happened to create that issue was it was something to do with the syncing of the scoreboard spreadsheet, the scoring spreadsheet, and whatever was displayed on screen. So the spreadsheet actually had my score correct. Like I was on, I forgot how much, like maybe 400-500 or something. And then so they eliminated someone else looking based on the scoreboard, the score sheet. But then the commentators and the whole world watching the YouTube saw that I was at the bottom because somehow the score sheet wasn't synced with whatever gets displayed on the live stream.
Yeah.
And so the commentators were saying that I was out. And so then the commentators and the organizers were a bit confused. And then eventually, in the heat of the moment, I think, and they also have to keep track of everyone else as well. So I think at that moment, they went with whatever was shown on the live stream. And then later, as they investigated, they saw that that wasn't correct. And so it was actually a lot of the other contestants who really thought I should be brought back. And so like that was why I was really appreciative of their support. And I mean, these are my competitors who, are competing against me for the same prize. And they were all the ones who said like, it's unfair and we should bring him back. So yeah, that was really nice of them.
Be careful what you wish for. I'm just kidding. I did see actually when I actually saw it flicker back from like 75 to 515 a few times. So we were actually seeing the right score, but it just wasn't staying. So anyhow, but I have to ask you at the end of the competition now. So fast forward to the end. You take off your headphones and you sit in your chair and you fold your arms. And there's like 30 seconds left. And I'm thinking, is there a Hail Mary in Excel or maybe not? Because was there any chance you were going to, someone was going to pull a Hail Mary in 30 seconds? Or you must have been really confident that this is it?
No, I wasn't confident.
You weren't?
But it was, there's nothing you can do because it's half a minute and I've already basically used my Hail Mary. So I already tried to guess answers to all the things I couldn't solve. And I think it's, I didn't want to do that too excessively. Like, it's not, I guess it's not too nice to keep guessing and looking at the score and guess and guess. And so I gave it one guess and then that's basically all I could do. And you can't really solve a whole level of a question in like 30 seconds. So I was looking at the scoreboard, obviously, and just hoping that it doesn't change. What I wasn't sure about was whether the other contestants were really close to solving another level or whether they're also like stuck and can't do anything. So but in the past, there has been a time when it was like down to the last 10 seconds and then I was behind and then I just guessed something and it happened to be right. So that got me through the semifinals the year before last year, actually. Yeah.
Pretty bold. So when you reflect, and I'm guessing, will you be going to defend your crown this year too? Yeah,
definitely.
Excellent.
Well,
yes,
and I'm trying to defend it.
I am close to Vegas, so I will definitely, just remind me when it is. I'm happy to drive over. It's not too far. So when you reflect on the 3 so far, what have you learned? What would you say has been your biggest learning experience?
Yeah, I've definitely learned in terms of just Excel skills. So if I reflect on my Excel skills 3 years ago, yeah, it is quite different to my skills today. And I think some of that is just keeping up with everyone else. So everyone's learning, and as we solve each of these problems, and or maybe like when we don't solve it in the real thing, and then we go back and solve it properly, we're actually learning quite a lot in terms of our skills and how to solve problems. So I think that's one of them. I probably learned a bit around, or just being more comfortable sharing my experiences and talking to people, being on podcasts like this. These are not things I would have done in the past. Yeah, I'm not so much of an extroverted kind of person. But yeah, especially like after last year, radio stations would be calling me up and wanting me to say a few words. So yeah, that's been a bit of a learning experience as well.
Very interesting. So I definitely can't let you go without asking you some Excel questions. I mean, what better opportunity than to ask the Excel world champion? So when it comes to Excel, like what are some examples of your preferred functions, and what tasks do you use them for?
Yeah, so I'll start with my favorite one, which is the let function. That's a new function, so I think you need the latest version or a pretty recent version to have that. I like it because it's really powerful. So you can do a lot of things within the same function, but you can also make your formula legible. So it's not like you have this 4-line formula, it's all just a big mess and you're doing a lot, but no one knows what you're doing. In the let function, you can break up each component. You can do like a first calculation first, and then store it in a variable, and then reuse that later. So it's just a really nice way to do a lot of things in one step. And it also means sometimes you can be more efficient. So you don't need to calculate the same thing twice, because it's like you've stored it in a variable. You can refer to that variable later.
How do you spell it? How do you spell it? Sorry, how do you spell it?
Let, L-E-T.
Just L-E-T. Okay, let. Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, that's my favorite, and I think a favorite of a lot of the competitors as well. Some of the other things are kind of standard stuff that I use in actual work, like SUMIFs, sum product, index match, XLOOKUPs, and things like that. Just because looking things up and summing things up is very standard kind of calculation work. The more a few more newer functions that I like are sort, unique, and maybe TOCOL. So TOCOL. That's more around cleaning up data or manipulating your data. Yeah, I guess back in the old days, without a function like sort, sure, you can like press the button and sort it, but there's no way to dynamically sort things unless you set up some extra formulas, like you do a ranking first and then you look up a rank. Like, it's a lot more cumbersome than just using one function. But yeah, all of these I think require more recent versions of Excel. So if you're on an old version, maybe you should upgrade. But yeah, unique again is a really nice function to just summarize up the unique values. And again, you could do that originally using the remove duplicates, but that's like something you got to keep rerunning if your data changes.
Yeah. Do you use dynamic ranges or array functions much?
I do these days. I didn't a few years ago. I guess it was pretty new back then. But yeah, definitely do these days. And I think it's almost like a whole new way of using Excel and thinking about how you solve problems. I think it's really powerful, and it's a really good idea. And yeah, I do think people should try and learn more about dynamic arrays. It is new, but yeah, it's really good.
Yeah. So one of the functions you mentioned, I've been looking forward to this question because it seems like this is a never-ending debate. I mean, you have people on different sides of the fences. They're like, okay, just go straight with XLOOKUP. But when we think of 3 very common functions in Excel, VLOOKUP, index match, XLOOKUP, how do you think of these 3, the trade-off between them? Do you have a preference? And how do you decide to use one over the other, or do you just pick one? How do you think that through?
Yes, I wouldn't really consider VLOOKUP amongst them. I think
too basic, too juvenile.
Yeah, it's I'll talk about VLOOKUP later. Well, I can talk about it now. I think it's the worst of the options because it's less like it's just an old way of doing it, I think. So it's you have to have the thing that you're looking up on the left. You can't have it on the right or in the middle or anywhere else. So that's like an unnecessary restriction. The other big thing I don't like about it is often you might you VLOOKUP something and then you pick the column. So I want column number 6 or something, and then someone adds a new column in between your data because you want to calculate an extra thing, and then suddenly your whole VLOOKUP gets destroyed.
Yeah.
And so things like that, it's just it's like it's not a nice function to use, especially with the other options around. And it's like error prone, especially like it's very common for people to hard code the column number.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
you have to like count, like if it's a really big table, you might be like column
yeah.
85, and then you got to count which one's that. Yeah, so I don't think anyone needs to use VLOOKUP these days. XLOOKUP and index match, I think I use them both. So if I'm just looking at one column, then XLOOKUP's just, I guess, the natural one I go to these days. But index match is quite nice when you've got a table and it's pretty easy to calculate which row or which column you want. So especially in like general insurance, we have triangles. And so you've got your, which accident quarter, which development quarter, and things like that. And so, when there's a bit more of a two-dimensional need to look things up, then index match can be quite handy. And maybe sometimes when you just want the which element within a vector. So if you've already figured out that I want the 5th item, then you just go index something, comma 5, and then that's done. You're not actually looking up something. You just want to return which element. So that in that situation, you don't need to use XLOOKUP. You just go straight to index. So I use both of them a lot, both at work as well as in the competitions. If you watch me, probably every single round, I'll use like XLOOKUP or index match.
I might have seen the index match. No, there's one actually specific I want to ask about because I'd never heard of it. Lambda functions. What are lambda How do you describe lambda functions?
Yeah, so lambda functions is basically a function that lets you write your own function. So it's let's say you want to do a weighted average. And so how you would do that is you normally use a sum product. So you sum product your thing that you want to average, and then your weights, and then you divide it by the sum of the weights. Now you can do that everywhere, but you can also write a lambda to define like weighted average is defined as sum product this and that, and then divide by the sum of the weights. And then from that point onwards, you can use this weighted average function everywhere directly. So the idea is that you can write your own functions and then you can use them throughout your spreadsheet. So you don't have to, I guess partly it's a bit more efficient, but then also there's a bunch of new functions that relate to lambda functions that allow you to apply your lambda functions to and sort of accumulate things up or create like arrays based on calculating your function on things, and it can get quite complicated. So I don't always use it, but it's quite a new area and quite powerful if you know what you're doing.
Well, thanks for the
very flexible for you.
Yeah, thanks for the overview. I'm excited for people to try that out. Now, this is so there's two sides to Excel. There's a part where we're all comfortable. I feel like we all, well, I'm not, maybe not you, but all the people have a love-hate relationship. That's why I think the page Excel, I don't know if you follow Excel memes on Instagram, but there are XLSX humor, I think it's called. We're very comfortable with it, but of course, sometimes you get errors and it's just not, I think tasks can become out of scope. So like as you're doing work as an actuary, how do you assess when the task is truly out of scope for Excel? I imagine like you're so proficient in Excel, I imagine you have a certain comfort level. But how do you think of like when a task, I mean, it's usually not one or the other, it's sometimes a combination, but kind of how do you think of that dynamic?
Yeah, it probably helps that just being good at Excel, I do default to Excel a lot of the time.
Yeah, so I
And
guess.
Excel is probably I would say it's the first, it's the first thing I go to because you can actually do a lot within Excel, and also it's very transparent. So anyone can open up the spreadsheet and they can look at the formulas and understand what's going on. Whereas if I'm doing something in R or Python or kind of more coding environment, then it takes a bit more technical expertise for someone else to just go in and understand what's been done. So yeah, I think I really do like the transparency and just the transparency of Excel. So when would I go out of Excel? It's basically when I'm doing things that Excel just cannot handle, or it's like not really designed to handle that kind of stuff. So it's either data that's too big because it doesn't fit on the spreadsheet, or you don't actually want to fill the whole spreadsheet, because then Excel becomes really slow. So if you've got too many rows of data or too many columns, then Excel is probably not the place to do that. And then the other situation is if I'm doing something a bit more complicated, like building a statistical model or machine learning or things like that. Excel probably isn't quite designed to do that. I mean, these days Excel, or not quite yet. I think in beta mode, you can have access to Python in Excel. But then I think you also, like that functionality, it's great, but it also sends your data to the cloud or something like that. Or I'm not too familiar with that, because it is a beta function. But yeah, potentially one day in the future, Excel can do a bit more of those powerful things. But yeah, it's usually either data's too big or the calculations are just too not within the scope of Excel.
I'm sure we've all gotten that error that it only takes 1.8 million rows? I forget what the limit is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, if you've been an actuary for longer than a couple of months, you've probably gotten that error.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one question I have is, when there's going to be younger actuaries, actuarial students, maybe even people in college who want to improve their Excel skills. So, what tips do you have? Do you have any tips for early career actuaries and actuarial students who want to improve their Excel skills?
Yeah, I think my number one tip is to have the right mindset. So a mindset where you're eager to learn. And I mean, that's basically how I learned my Excel. It's not like someone sat me down and just taught me single thing. A lot of it was self-learning. So maybe towards the beginning of your career, you might be given existing spreadsheets, and some of them are could be really good, and so you can learn from that. But others might just be legacy spreadsheets. So it was set up that way 15 years ago, and it's like a regular recurring piece of work, like an annual reserving valuation project, and no one's ever had the time to improve it. So there might actually be a lot of things which are inefficient or written up in a way that's just not very nice. And so don't be afraid to think about how to improve spreadsheets, and Google things. Especially, I guess VBA is an area where I did a lot of self-learning as well. So I just record a macro to do things, and then I read the code, and then it's kind of, it's not too difficult to understand what the code's doing if it's already been written by the recorder. So yeah, I think mindset is definitely important. Just always be eager to learn. These days, there are a lot of videos on really fancy stuff in Excel. So it shouldn't be too hard to just find a nice YouTube video that can teach you a lot. The other tip is probably to give dynamic arrays a go. So they are pretty new, so you might not see it in existing work if someone's just showing you a spreadsheet from a few years ago. So dynamic arrays could potentially be a better way to solve that problem. I think, if you use it well, then it can save you from errors and things like that, because let's say you're calculating a whole table of values using a dynamic array, then there's no risk that someone's accidentally changed the formula in the middle without you knowing, or you're just absolutely certain that the formula is consistent across that whole array. So yeah, there are benefits of dynamic arrays, and obviously it also gives you access to a lot of the newer powerful functions. So yeah, give that a go.
I was thinking of what you said, reflecting on what you said, because I use Visual Basic very intensely for maybe 2 years straight every single day. And I remember that was one of the tips I got. Oh, you can record the macro. Actually, how I learned it was actually just kind of reverse engineered. I was fortunate, I guess. I had some sample code I could use, and I felt like I learned a lot from just retracing those steps. I don't know. For some reason, that method didn't work for me, but it's good to know that there's many different ways to learn. I mean, I did, in training, of course. One I'll add, which I think everyone can agree on is if you have the opportunity to do training, that helps as well. And of course, you have to reinforce it. The training alone without the reinforcement is not going to stick. No.
And definitely if you have hands-on experience, using that at work, then it does help a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting is that when we think of actuarial science and esports, both of them involve solving problems or problem solving. So what are your thoughts on a potential link between being an actuary and participating in esports?
Yeah, definitely for Excel, it's a very natural link. So because we use the software a lot, and because in Excel, often the problems are like a bit numeric. So I think the actuarial skill set just aligns very well with Excel esports. I would say if we're thinking more generally esports, if there are new esports that are similar to the Excel esports, so I mean, it doesn't have to be in Excel, like the software Excel. It could be like other software where you're also solving problems. So it's kind of like where the esport is focused on problem solving, then I do feel like actuaries are well placed to have a good go at those. As for things like video games, probably depends on how much you enjoy playing those games in your spare time.
Yeah, I definitely, I mean, I can't speak for many actuaries, but I used to play games like Zelda, some of those games where you have to get to the different levels and you have to figure it out. And I mean, back then I had no idea I wanted to do actuarial science, but maybe I'm seeing in hindsight, some connection between problem solving and, who knows what the possibilities could be. I don't know if we're going to have the equivalent of a world Fortnite champion in actuarial, but who knows what the possibilities are with esports. And I'm glad that, not just you're winning tournaments, but hopefully you're getting you have fun with it as well,
Yeah, it's definitely been fun for me. I've enjoyed the experience a lot.
Yeah, no, this has been just the time has really flown by. I don't know, I'm not sure about you, but I felt like it's really flown by. This has been a really enjoyable conversation and, just looking forward to sharing it with the community around the globe. And, just want to thank you again for your time, Andrew. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, no worries. It definitely has flown. Didn't realize it's been so long. But yeah, it was great to be here. Yeah, thanks for inviting me on the show.
Excellent. And I was going to say good night, but it's probably, I think it's very early there. So have a wonderful day for those of us on the East and Pacific coast. We'll try to have a good evening. So thanks again, Andrew.
Okay. Thanks, Dom.